Hi, everyone. Welcome to another virtual program of the Garden Club of Jacksonville. We are thrilled to have all of you here tonight. And some of you are just joining us, and so if you come in late, don't worry, we have a couple of housekeeping things to do before we get started. So get in here, get comfortable for some amazing knowledge to be dropped on you tonight. I want to introduce myself. I am Denise Reagan. I'm the Executive Director of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, and I'm here with my colleague, Damian Lamar Robinson, who is our Operations Manager. Hi, Damian.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Denise.
And we are doing this program with the help of the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund. The Jessie Ball DuPont Fund gave us a grant that is allowing us to hold virtual programs just like this, and we're very grateful for their support in this area. And we always like to start with a poll, and tonight's poll is going to be super fun. So I'm going to launch that now. What kind of wildlife would you like to attract to your yard? And you can see there are some great options there. And if other is your answer, then put that in the chat, and we'll share some of your answers. Got a lot of votes coming in. We're about 70% of the way there. Let's see if we can get almost up to 100%. People still deliberating. We give it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll. All right, and then I'm going to share the results. And Damien, tell us how people voted.
All right. It looks like, wow, 96% of you would love to attract butterflies in your yard. I'm sure we can answer that question for you guys tonight. Several of you want bees and other pollinators, birds, about 27% snakes, and other in the chat box. Someone had LK2 had deer and wild foxes and turkeys, and obviously hummingbirds is one of them that people want to attract in the garden. So yeah.
All right, great answers, everyone. Thank you for participating. And I'm going to stop sharing that. And so we've come to the great part of our show where we're going to introduce our speaker, Bill Berthet. Bill is a father, grandfather, author, lecturer, and award-winning photographer. His fascination with butterflies started at age 11, catching butterflies by hand. A certified gemologist appraiser, Bill owned Berthet Jewelers in Mandarin for more than 30 years and retired in 2013. A Jacksonville resident for 43 years, he received the Volunteer Jacksonville Heart of Gold Nature of Caring Award for creating, financing, planting, and maintaining a butterfly garden at the Tilly Fowler Regional Park from 2003 to 2008. In 2019, Bill received the Best Wildlife Yard by the St. John's Riverkeeper. In 2007, since 2007, he has volunteered as a citizen scientist, surveying Northeast Florida's conserved properties for imperiled butterflies. Bill has photographed butterflies in the field all over the world. He presently is a member of the Strategic Planning Committee, North, of the Imperiled Butterflies of North Florida Work Group. Since 2000, Bill has transformed his 1/3 acre yard, 1 1/3 acre yard, into a habitat for butterflies, birds, pollinators, and many other forms of life. Please welcome Bill Berthet to today's virtual program. And we are going to be asking you to post your questions in the chat throughout the program. So that's along the way, we can kind of stop his talk and pepper him with questions, because I know you're going to have lots of them. And we'll kind of do them along the way. So don't forget to put your questions in the chat, because we want to get to as many of them as possible. All right. So Bill, are you there? Let's see if we can find him out there.
So, Bill, if you can hear us, if you could have your assistant unmute your phone, that would be great, so we can actually hear you. Yeah, there we go. Welcome,
How's
Bill.
that? Does that sound good?
That's great.
Great.
Bill, thank you so much for being here. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you very much. I just got a call on my Fred Flintstone phone from Denise wanting to have me do a program for you guys tonight. So let's get started. Welcome to my wilderness on the creek. I've got a 1/3 acre habitat here that's dedicated to butterflies, bees, birds, and other critters. I've taken 25 trips all over the world, photographing butterflies in the field. Presently, I'm writing a digital series of documenting these trips in the worldwide publication Lepidopterist Society News that's published 4 times a year. There's articles in there from Russia, from China, from Papua, and other areas there. Okay, next slide. Well, yeah, that's fine. Go back to the other one,
Okay.
first one. Okay, I have a book that I put out that's it's taken me several years to do it. I've redone it 3 or 4 different times. It's 74 pages long. It has lots and lots of knowledge and information on butterflies, bees, hummingbirds, and things along that lines. It's available for purchase. It runs $15. You can see my email there. Just go ahead and email me. We can take care of it from there. It's a publication that is well worth the money. And a number of the slides we're going to have tonight are going to be from there. Okay, next one. Got to remember here that my yard has a mixture of both native and non-native plants. I look at a plant for its value to our pollinators here. So I find the best plant I can, and if it's native, great. If it's non-native, that's okay too. The non-natives tend to give me a broader range of attracting different wildlife and Northeast Florida pollinators. Next slide. There's a number of butterflies and moths that species that depend on different trees around the United States. For instance, oak trees, there's 534 species of butterflies and moths that depend on it. On oaks or blackberry or black cherry, you have 458, all the way down to walnut, which has 130. Next slide, please. Now we have the number of butterflies and moths that use plants and vines. So we were at trees, now we're at plants and vines. Goldenrod is up there with 115. Asters are at 112. Milkweed has 12, Vernonias 11, and so on. Here we have our great purple hairstreak on the left and our southern dog-faced butterfly, nectarine on blazing star on the right. Next slide, please. And of course, here we have our Spicebush Swallowtail on our cardinal flower. Next slide. We have native bushes and plants for nectar that like wet feet. Normally I was going to show you those on my dock, which I have a number of these. A lot of these I either grow in my yard, I make water habitats where I'll take either a pot or a flower box, I'll put a pond liner on it, and then I'll fill it with dirt, and then I'll put a lot of water in it. That way it has a higher degree of moisture that will help these plants that like wet feet to grow. One of the best ones we have is sweet pepper bush. That's growing right now. in my yard. It's usually in bloom in June and July. It's a real magnet for mainly bees and wasps and other insects. We also have, next slide, please. We have Carolina Redroot on the left. Then we also have Cyrillia, which is our tie or swamp Cyrilla. That one grows in my yard. Notice the long, elongated type flowers that have many different florets on it. Those are the type of flowers that I'm looking for as far as nectar sources are concerned. A lot of hair streaks like this are small butterflies, as well as a number of our other Northeast Florida pollinators. It grows along creek margins and river margins. I have it in my yard. It has a bloom time from May to maybe July or August, depending where it's at. To the right, we have the cardinal flower. That again is one that I've made a small little wet habitat that I grow it in, and it's just coming up now, so it won't be in bloom for another couple of weeks. So we're looking at the end of July, the beginning of August. Next slide, please. Oh, great one, Buttonbush. The one on the left, that also likes wet feet. It's grows along, again, the creek and river margins here. When I'm out doing my surveys out on our conserved lands up in Northeast Florida, that's a main plant when it's in bloom, and it's usually in May and in June. And it grows, again, in wet areas where there's drainage areas going through the particular conserved properties. Water lilies, another one that's good, and also pickerelweed. Pickerelweed is a premium nectar plant for our Northeast Florida pollinators, particularly our skippers and a number of our other butterflies. What you see here, you have the Gulf fritillary, and this one here is a male because it's a bright orange color. But a great plant to have in your yard if you can grow it. Next slide, please. Now we have native nectar trees that we have in my yard. Black cherry, the redbud, and the Chickasaw plum. What's important about these plants in your yard is that they're early nectar sources. They generally bloom in late January and in February and the beginning of March. They bloom for a 2 or 3 week period at a time, and this is a time of year when we don't have many other nectar sources, so they're really really important. The one on the right, the Chickasaw plum, there's a spot where I go up to Simmons State Forest in Nassau County, and there's a thicket of 54 plants up there, and I get up to 23 species of butterflies that fly on this particular grove of Chickasaw plum. It's so neat because there's so many honeybees and other types of bees that are on it. It just has a complete sound of buzzing as you get close to it. Really neat.
Hey, Bill.
Very good. Yes.
I love these 3 examples because the foliage is so different in color as well. So they create a lot of interest just in the way the tree looks, even without the flowers.
Yeah, butterflies in particular really like white flowers. They also like orange and purple. Those would be some really top colors. And the one on the left and the one on the right are both white, where the red bud is going to be a pinkish to red color. Next slide, please. So here we have the Groundsel tree. This is important because it's a nectar source in the fall. So the last 3 we looked at were early spring nectar sources. This particular one blooms usually in September, October, and November. It's a very important plant also in the western part of Florida along the Panhandle region there. A lot of our migrating monarchs that are heading west to their overwintering grounds find groves of these trees, and they roost on them at night, and they also use it as a nectar source. Water oaks, of course, are just great for all different types of our pollinators. You can go to the next slide. Beautyberry is again one that we use here. Makes jellies out of it, and it's a good all-round plant. It's good for birds too. When you have a plant that has a lot of foliage to it, where they can hide in it and stay away from their predators, it's always a good thing. One thing about Beautyberry here in Northeast Florida, though, is after it blooms out and the berries are gone, you can cut it back almost like a crepe myrtle. You can cut it way back, and then it'll all come back the next year instead of letting it to continue to grow. Again, we had the Groundsel Tree, which we already talked about. Walter's viburnum, I think every yard should have that plant. It's okay as a nectar source, but it's really great for shelter for birds. I have one about 10 feet from where I'm at right now, right by my bird feeder, and it's constantly being used because its foliage is dense. There's a lot of branches, and the tree's probably 7 or 8 feet tall. So it's a lot of people that have gardens, they think of only plants, which again is only up a couple feet high. But to really have a full habitat, you need trees, you need bushes, you need plants, and you need vines. So you kind of need a combination of all those to have the most effective yard. Next slide, please. Oakleaf Hydrangea, not a lot of nectar value there. It's just a beautiful plant. Generally, it's going to bloom in May and early June. Our red bay, that is a host plant, or actually it's a tree. It's a host tree for our Palamedes Swallowtail. There has been a decimation of this particular tree by the ambrosia beetle, powder post beetle. It has what's called laurel wilt disease, which came over on a ship from Asia in 2002 in southeastern Georgia. And then that beetle has slowly made its way south through Florida, starting in 2007, 2008. I have several plants. That plant you see right there, if you look at it, it's dead. So it is having an effect on reducing the populations of the Palamedes Swallowtail, which is uses it as its host plant. A wild lime, that's a tree that's generally grown in South to Central Florida. I grow it up here for as a host plant for my giant swallowtails, one of my favorite butterflies. I was working in my third bedroom yesterday, putting up some blinds, and I look out the window and I saw a male and female fly by that were mating, which is the first time I've seen that. So I run out with just my shorts on and grab my camera, run over, start taking pictures. It flies into my neighbor's yard. So I'm sitting there laying down on the ground on her driveway. She happens to come out to get her. She rounds the corner to get into her car. She looks at me and she goes, "What the heck?" I scared the bejesus out of her. So I explained to her what I was doing, and I was really happy to get the particular shot. You go to the next slide, please.
That's a fabulous story, Bill. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I had to come in. My knees were all scraped and dirty and all that stuff. But you know, when you have an opportunity arise, you take it. So it's really an exciting time. I came in and get the fist pump, and you look up and you say thank you, Mother Nature. It has great entertainment value. Next slide. Simpson Stopper, that's another good one. Not a lot of nectar value, some, but again, it's a great plant to have. It's native. It grows pretty quick here. I've put some in 3 or 4 years ago. They're already 6 to 7 feet tall. Again, it has multiple branches to it, and it has a lot of hiding areas for some of our smaller birds. The Yopan holly is more of for berries later on for the birds, but also I like its structure. It has really cool looking bark. Also, the angles and the way that the branches are adorn this particular tree. It's a neat tree just to look at. Firebush should be in every yard. we have two types of firebush. We have Amelia patens patens, which is our native firebush, and we also have our non-native firebush, which is Amelia patens glabra. And glabra is means smooth. So to be able to tell the difference, you can take a leaf and then turn it over, and usually you're not going to be able to see the hairs on it unless you have a 10-power loop. But rub it against your cheek, and you'll feel a little bit of bristleness. And if that's the case, then it's going to be a native. If you don't have that, then it's going to be the non-native plant. Here in Jacksonville, that plant now is over 15 feet tall in about 4 different areas in my yard, because we did not have a freeze last year, and then the year before we only had one real mild freeze. So it's really done well. A very important plant for our pollinators, specifically some of our butterflies, the zebra longwing, as well as our ruby-throated hummingbird. Next slide, please.
Bill, I think this may be a good opportunity to interject some questions here. We have a plethora of questions coming in from some of our participants tonight. So I'll field some of those, and if you could take a quick moment and just provide your best answer. I mean, you're very, very knowledgeable about these butterflies and their habitats and all of the types of plants, and everybody's got questions. So one of the questions we have is, where can you find a buttonbush for sale?
Buttonbush right now, there's native and uncommon plants will probably have it. Otherwise, Southern Horticultural down in St. Augustine, they possibly could have it too.
Okay, awesome. And there was someone mentioned as well, the Chiappini Farm Nursery in Hawthorne has a really great option for native plants there as well.
I use them all the time. I go and I get online. I call, I believe, Dave, and then what they'll do is they won't let you in the farm right now, but they will take your order. In this case, my last order was about 45 plants. He brought it out in a trailer and just left it there at the front of the property, and I was able to load it myself. It's located about 15 or 20 minutes from Hawthorne, near 301.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jennifer Kondo also provided a fantastic link for everyone. I just wanted you to go back through the chat, if you will, and there is a butterfly gardening link to the University of Florida extension, and there's a great link there. So Jennifer, thanks for sharing that as well. And Christine's mentioning that she's having trouble with her birds eating her caterpillars, and she wants any recommendations, or is it just something that nature would fix on its own?
For me, it's a natural cycle. I don't really worry about it. One way to help to combat that is to take and plant host plants in 5 or 6 different places in your yard. That way the predators are more spread out. They have to find it. If you have host plant in one spot and the predators know it, they're going to be easier prey. So I would plant host plants for a particular butterfly in multiple areas in your yard.
Awesome. See, this is why Bill's our presenter tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Can you tell us if there is a dwarf Simpson Stopper is a good plant?
Well, if it's dwarf, it's going to be tiny, and it's not going to give you what you want. You want the tallest plant possible to give shelter for your birds. And if it's really low to the ground, I don't think the birds are going to be very comfortable. So my recommendation would be not to have a dwarf Simpson Stopper.
Okay, awesome. And which is the native firebush? That's
native firebush is called Hemlock patens. Many of the nurseries don't even know the difference. Most of them are going to sell the non-native, which is Hemlock patens glabra. And again, I explained the test to take the leaf, kind of rub it against your cheek. If you feel kind of a bristleness to it, then it's going to be native, and if not, it's going to be non-native. I have both plants in my yard, so they do both grow to large sizes. It's just that for your purists that are more native plant conscious, then you're going to have to do more homework to find the Hemilia patens.
That's a great suggestion there. I love that that test, the cheek test.
The cheek
Yes,
test.
ma'am.
All right. I think we're on the Palamedes Swallowtail.
Let's go to the next slide. Oh, okay. So now we're going to have plants. These are native plants that I have in my yard. These are going to be nectar sources for our Northeast Florida pollinators, as well as for butterflies and bees. The three here that you see on the screen should be in every yard. First is Spanish needles, the Bidden's elba. This is a weed, but remember, a weed is a plant whose virtues have yet to be discovered. And this plant grows all over the state of Florida. It's mainly it starts in March and April, and then it really ends up, maximum bloom time would be late September. This plant, to me, is a number one or number two plant you can have because it brings everything in. It's also a host plant to our dainty sulfur butterfly. For a ground cover, I use fog fruit, Phyllonata flora, which you see here. You see the salt marsh skipper in the middle. This is a plant that only grows 4 or 5 inches tall. And it has, again, look at the flower type. It has multiple florets on it. The butterfly can stand on the flower itself. It can take its proboscis or its tongue and just start stabbing away into these florets to extract nectar. Another premium plant that I have in my yard is snow square stem, Melanthera nevea. That particular plant's really hard to find. Not many nurseries really carry it. In 2006, I was doing a butterfly survey at the junction of CR 208 and County Road 13 in St. Johns County along the St. Johns River, where this plant grows quite a bit. And I was astounded at all the different species of butterflies that came to it. So I took some plants. I have a friend that has property there, so I dug some plants up, and I've been doing seeds. So I've been growing it in my yard ever since. I have a landing pad in my front yard that's 12 feet wide by 40 feet long that consists mainly of this particular bush. It gets, at its best, it can be 5 feet tall by 5 feet wide, and it's kind of squirrely looking, and it does spread fairly easily. So if you have an ornamental type garden, you might want to grow it in a pot or somewhere, and then have to deadhead it and cut it once it's the blooms are, because the seeds can be fly away pretty easily and start. But for me, I want a more natural look, and I'm here to benefit as many pollinators as I can, so I just let it go. What's great about this plant is it grows. It has a long, go back please, it has a long growing season to it, and again, it has white flowers. It has multiple florets, like in a small little ball, and I grow it from seed, and I probably have 100 plants in my yard, and part of it's going out of bloom right now. I do have some for sale in my greenhouse. If somebody's interested in, they can contact me through my email, and again, it's a premium plant. But getting back to the landing pad, so it's 12 feet by 40 feet long in the front yard. So what that does is we have a lot of pollinators that are flying around a lot of these areas, but they're actually flying around over sterile yards because they really don't have a place to land. So if you have a landing pad like this, it just brings in all kinds, bees and wasps and snakes. I get the lizards. The lizards love it because that way they got all these snacks to snack on with all the different pollinators that are coming in. So it's a great plant, snow square stem. Next slide. Okay, ironweed, giant ironweed. That's another great plant. It kind of likes from semi-shade to shade. This particular plant, I was doing a butterfly survey down in the Orange Creek spillway off of 301, and I was in a forested area where this plant, there's 40 or 50 plants that were there. The first time I ever saw it, I just sat there for a half an hour and just was amazed at all the different pollinators that came in, and particularly our swallowtails. There's two types here. We have a small ironweed that only grows about 18 inches to maybe 2 feet. That usually blooms first, and that's, you're going to find that on the sand hills and the pine flatwoods area here in some of our conserved properties in Northeast Florida. I grow it. I have a lot of these plants, like this plant here, I have a spot where I have maybe 15 of them all together. So don't put just one plant somewhere and one plant, another spot, and then another plant, another spot. Put all your plants in one grouping. You know, butterflies and pollinators, they're lazy. They want to hang around just one spot. So they can just buzz around, hit nectar from one area, move a few feet, hit nectar from another area. So the more you can put in groups or bunches, the better off you're going to be. This plant is going from blooms from June, late May, June, and July, and in August. The blue mist flower is Azuritum, or Siam weed. That's another one that I grow here. It's more of a plant, I believe they call it Crucia in Texas, but it's a phenomenal plant for our Northeast Florida pollinators. Here's an example of a soldier butterfly. Now here's the butterfly that's generally from South Florida. I've actually had soldier butterflies in my yard, which of course were new documented records in Duval County. So it's a great plant. Butterfly weed, which is our Asclepias tuberosa. This is our native one. That's kind of orange flower. It's one you can use for monarchs. It's great, but it doesn't have as much leaf mass as our tropical milkweed, and it's a little bit slower growing. Next slide, please. Spotted Beebalm, another great one in the fall that has a lot of bees, and our pollinators like this. Goldenrod is crucial. It's one of the best plants you can have. What I do is I grow it in big round tubs, and I've got a number of this for sale if anybody wants it. It usually grows naturally in our some of our conserved lands, like right over here in Julington Durban Preserve. We have the large pine flatwoods, and then we have the sand hills that are there. So like sand hill, and you can actually, in a good year, have acres of this stuff, and it's a really important nectar source. Tropical sage is one that we use here. Easy to grow, self-seeds, and the hummingbirds like it. Next.
That spotted Beebalm is beautiful.
Yes, and it's a cool looking plant.
Yeah.
So these are some of the native vines I have in my yard. Here we have Passiflora incarnata on the left, which is our Maypop, which is the only real native one that really grows here, even though there are a number of them in Central and South Florida. I grow cross vine, and I grow also trumpet vines. These flowers as you notice, they have long tubular throats to them, and they're particularly attractive to our Cloudless Sulphur and our orange-barred sulphur, which have really longer proboscises or tongues than other butterflies. So they're able to reach in there to grab the nectar. And also, of course, they're great for our hummingbirds. Carolina jasmine, it's an important plant. It grows generally along fence hedges, and up in our conserved areas, it grows along pine flatwoods and sand hills, in where there's turkey oaks, and you have large entanglements of this, and it's one of our first nectar sources. So here we have redbud, we have black cherry for our tree, and we have our Carolina jasmine. This actually blooms before the other two, so it's like in late January and February. the leather flower, I just have that on there because that to me is my coolest plant in the yard. I just get really excited when I see that. Coral honeysuckle, another one that has long throat, that for nectar sources, mainly again for our ruby-throated hummingbird, as well as for our cloudless sulphur and our orange-barred sulphur.
I agree. The leather flower is awesome.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Cypress vine, tie vine, scarlet creeper. These are all native plants that I grow. I have a 60-foot pergola that it divides my property from my neighbor's property that has all this kind of stuff on it. I just let it grow naturally, and you just never know what's on it. So you can see the skipper in the middle. I can't see that far. Anyway, so they go right deep down into the throat and extract nectar. Next, please. So we have some native host trees. So we have the one that we have willow on our left. That one is important for our viceroy butterfly as far as host. It usually likes wet feet. It grows in more wet environments. Also, we have the red spotted purple that also uses it, and also our tiger swallowtail. Where am I here? I can't see it.
Is that the hackberry butterfly?
Oh, okay. Oh, we got hackberry. Hackberry tree is probably one of the most important host trees that you can have, because you're going to get 4 different species of butterfly. You're going to be hackberry emperor. You're going to get the tawny emperor. You're going to get our snout uses it, as well as our question mark uses it, and our mourning cloak. So we get a whole bunch of different ones. We have the spicebush. That we have it's a small tree that also is getting affected, as well as the sassafras, by some of our some of these different beetles that are coming in. They're really having an effect on some of these trees. But both the sassafras as well as the spicebush tree. They're for our Spicebush Swallowtails. They only grow here. I only get them 7 or 8 feet tall. Out in our native areas, they can be quite tall. What's interesting is the Spicebush caterpillar, the female will lay the egg on the leaf. It'll cut a little slit into the leaf and then fold it over and make a little shelter out of it. And go to the next slide. Okay, go back. Okay, go back. So then what it is, the caterpillar will make a small little shelter in it, and it'll kind of back itself in. And the caterpillar's front portion, or the head area of it, has these 2 large false eyes. So when you look at it from looking in, you see these large eyes, which helps to keep the predators away. Next slide. So here we have the red spotted purple. This is a beautiful butterfly that we have. It feeds again on the black cherry. So the black cherry, we have several different ones. We have laurel cherry, and we have black cherry, which is our Prunus serratina, and then our laurel cherry is caroliniana. So we got a combination of nectar source in the spring, and here we have it as a host plant for our red spotted purple, which is a beautiful butterfly. Go back. Okay, next. So here we have the wild lime, and again, that I have in the yard. I've got 6 different trees. They're up to about 15 to 18 feet tall. Even though it's a plant that's from southern Florida, I have not had a problem with it as far as getting through the winters. The winter of 2010 was the worst one we've had, I believe, in a quarter of a century. We had about 12 days where we had below freezing temperatures all in a row. What happened is my wild lime trees, they died back to the base, but they all came back after a while. And it's our host tree here for our giant swallowtail. Next one, please. Here we have our eastern tiger swallowtail. Here's one you can see on the left. This is the dark phase. So we have two different females here. You notice the one on the left, that's a dark phase. That's generally is more common in later in the season, in the fall, and that's to mimic the pipevine swallowtail. And the pipevine swallowtail feeds on Aristolochia, which has toxins in it, which are distasteful to predators. So the predators associate that butterfly with the pipevine swallowtail, and they generally won't attack it. And then again, you see the one on the right is a tiger swallowtail, and that's our female, which you see a lot of bluish areas at the bottom of the hind wing. Next slide. Okay, these are nectar host plants that I have here. Give me just a minute.
The first one, the Spanish needles.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, so our Spanish needle, we have our it's a host plant for our dainty sulphur, and again, it's a premium nectar plant. The fog fruit is also a host plant for our common buckeye, Phaon crescent, as well as for our white peacock. The one on the right you see, of course, is our butterfly weed, or the tuberosa. That one is also, of course, for monarchs and queens. To the right, the next one here, we have pellitory. Pellitory is a small little plant that generally is only 2 or 3 inches tall, and it usually grows in a shaded, moist area, and you'd never even know you had it in your yard if you didn't look for it. But I started finding it 7 or 8 years ago, and then all of a sudden I find it all around the place. So it's a plant that's kind of hidden away, but yet it's a host plant for our red admiral butterfly. Next one is our great purple hairstreak. That's the one that you see there, the mistletoe. That is a parasitic plant that actually grows on many of our different oak trees, and you really don't even know it's there until the fall to winter time, when they lose the trees lose their leaves, and then all of a sudden all you see are these big balls, and that's actually the mistletoe that you're looking at. We have butterfly pea. What do we have? We have a pea in there. That's a sensitive pea. Sensitive pea is different in that if it's one that you touch the leaf and the leaf will actually close up on you while you do that. Partridge pea does not do that. It creates white flower, or creates yellow flowers, and it's a host plant for both our cloudless sulphur, our orange-barred sulphur, as well as our Serranus blue, sleepy orange, little yellow. So it's a good plant. Another thing too is these plants that are host plants to some of our sulphurs, when they are in bloom and they're yellow, the caterpillars will take the color of the actual flower itself. So they'll change colors from, they're normally green and black, and they'll change to yellow and black, with yellow with black stripes. And if it's all green and not in bloom yet, then you're going to have a plant, then you have a caterpillar that's going to be green with black stripes. We have the switch cane, which is something that I grow in my yard. It's generally grows in bottomland forest and along river and creek margin. Here it's host plant to our southern pearly eye butterfly. In 2015, we discovered a new butterfly species in the state of Florida, the Creole pearlii. And the closest it's been found in Georgia is about 43 air miles away. But we have 3 different bottomland forest areas in Ralph Simmons State Forest in Nassau County. This is right on the Florida-Georgia line. And at this time, it's the only place in Florida to find that particular species of butterfly. So we are still discovering new species of butterfly. This was in 2015. And if you get online, you can see some of the scientific papers, which I was a part of, as well as the field team that was doing the studying for this new discovery. Let's just go to twin flower right now. That plant is our native plant. It's only grows around maybe up to 18 inches to maybe 2 feet. It always has 2 flowers like that. It's pretty. It sells seeds. It's a nice kind of a ground cover to have, but it's also our host plant for our white peacock butterfly. And global warming. The white peacock butterfly usually is a butterfly that's from South to Central Florida. In the past 5 or 6 years, I've seen many more white peacocks show up in my yard. Another example is monk skipper. The monk skipper is generally from Central and South Florida also. Starting in 2018, I found some over in Julington Durban Preserve in September. And of course, it's a new county record for Duval County here. And then last year, and then just the other day, I actually had one in my yard. So I was really surprised. So it's global warming is having an effect on a lot of our Northeast Florida pollinators and our butterflies that are generally more confined to our more tropical areas in Central and South Florida. They're slowly moving north. Next slide, please. Here we have our great purple hairstreak, one of our most prettiest butterflies in the state of Florida. The one left is a rare shot of an open wing. It has brilliant blue metallic scaling to it, which when it flutters around, it's quite striking to see. The center one you see is a male because you see the blue there between the hind wing and the forewing. And again, it feeds on this oak on the mistletoe there. Next slide, please.
Let's take a pause and see if there are any questions that have come up. Damien?
Okay, sure.
Yes, we do. There's actually several questions that came in. A lot of people want to know where we can find wild lime.
I don't know of anywhere in northern Florida that you can find it. The place that I know usually has it is Lucas Nursery down in Oviedo, Florida, which is southeast of Orlando. They usually always have it in stock. But it's something that I've actually gone down there years ago to get a number of my plants, and it's not one that's easily found. Or maybe you could contact Native and Uncommon Plants and have them order it for you. That would be another suggestion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's several individuals that also share comments about the wasps and how they eat the caterpillars. Do you have any suggestions on maybe some deterrents or natural pest control?
I don't use any pest control at all. I let nature take its course. So if it's sitting there eating something, so be it.
Mm-hmm. And what's your take on butterfly puddling areas?
Puddling areas are extremely important. They're generally going to be in our conserved areas. For instance, in Osceola National Forest, which is in Columbia and Baker County, and Bethea State Forest, which is in Baker County, I do butterfly surveys there. And in June and July, on a good day, I count over 1,500 swallowtails. And that consists of mainly Palamedes swallowtails, Spicebush swallowtail, tiger swallowtails, and the occasional zebra swallowtail. What they're doing is they're coming out and they're taking the moist areas of sand and they're mineralizing. So they'll go in there and they'll stick their proboscis, taking some of the minerals, and the liquid goes through their body, and then they extract the minerals that are needed, and then they squirt out the excess moisture out through the back of their abdomen. So it's very important when I'm in some of the, for instance, if I'm in Peru, I might come to a puddling area that might have 400 to 500 butterflies. Generally, they're going to be just 4 or 5 species, and they're generally going to be they're going to be sulfurs and whites. I've had one place in Tampico, in Tamaulipas State, which is in northeastern Mexico, where I saw over 10,000 butterflies puddling. And when we went in there to take pictures, we scared them up. We couldn't see the back of the butterflies. There were so many. It was a tremendous sight.
Wow.
So as far as your yard, there's not really a whole lot you can do. You can take sand, you can go out to some certain areas, maybe dig up a little bit of sand, and what you'd want to do is have it in a way where you can irrigate it, so it's maybe at the bottom of a slope or maybe towards the middle of the slope, so naturally occurring rainwater filters through it, and that will excite some of the minerals that will attract some of these butterflies. But I really don't get that in my yard, but I see it all the time in our natural areas.
Awesome. I want to also, there's a couple comments. A few of you sent me messages privately, and I just wanted to, we didn't preface this, but here in Jacksonville, where we're located tonight, we could not do the presentation, or Bill couldn't be outside in his yard because of a thunderstorm earlier. So we wanted to show his yard just as much as you wanted to see it. And maybe, Bill, if you want to be willing to share a few of your photos of your yard, we can incorporate those on the Garden Club's website along with the video footage.
We can do that also, and if you want to have 2, no more than 3, want to make an appointment with me to come over to look at the yard, it will be very beneficial and could help to both excite you and to expedite you as far as creating your own natural habitat.
Exciting
the tour,
and expediting.
yeah,
a video that was prepared when Bill won the St. John's Riverkeeper Award for Wildlife Habitat Yard, and we will share that as part of the process when we do the story on this presentation on our website. So look for that as well.
Thank you, Bill. A couple more questions. Can you comment on the use of hatcheries for butterfly protection?
What does that mean, hatcheries? You're talking about raising butterflies?
And hatcheries, maybe in protecting them during the process of incubation?
Yes, you can sleeve a plant. So for instance, wild lime, if you have your giant swallowtail caterpillars are going towards their 5th instar and they're getting ready to go into chrysalis, you could actually take a small sleeve and then tie it together so that you're protecting that particular caterpillar at that particular time. You can also take some of the pupa if you want, and you can bring them inside. Some people take a hot glue gun, put a cardboard box, a piece of cardboard, put a little hot glue, and then put the chrysalises on there and do that. I did raise butterflies in my yard in 2004 to about 2007, and I just stopped doing it. It's a lot of work, and I just have everything done so it's all kind of working on its own and the way Mother Nature likes it, and I just deal with it that way. But I don't get too concerned about the death of this and the death of that because it's just all part of the cycle.
Okay. One final question. Is the sulfur also known as the cabbage butterfly?
No, they're two different butterflies. Cabbage butterfly is white. It's a white colored butterfly, all white. It has a dark black spot to it on the upper hind wing area. It generally is found in farmland areas and feeds on cabbage. And in fact, it's almost an endangered species here in central and central and northern Florida. I haven't seen a cabbage butterfly in over 15 years out in our conserved areas. It's just because of all the BT and all the different spraying that's being used around these different farm communities, it's killing all the plants that are around it. Because a lot of times you have the plant itself that they're growing, and then you have the peripheral, which have a lot of these other plants, which are really beneficial for both host and nectar for Northeast Florida pollinators. Mm-hmm. The yellow butterfly, that the most common one you're going to see is going to be our Cloudless Sulphur, and that one's pretty much all yellow. It's very common here. There's another one that's also, you might see, it's about 1.5 times the size of it. It's called our orange barred sulphur. That one is also yellow, and the females are going to have a different look to it. The males have some orange coloring to it at the base of the hind wing, and they both use the same nectar and host plants. I get them both in my yard quite often. So those would be the two most common yellow butterflies you have. The white one, which is the cabbage, you're probably not going to see it.
Yeah. And we have examples of the Cloudless Sulphur on the screen now.
Yeah, there you go. Right. You can see the female on the left, which has got a lot more markings on it, and then the one on the right. And then again, you see the Jessamine here, which is, again, the really early nectar source that's in late January and February. And this particular butterfly is quite fond of that plant during that time.
All right, one last question before we continue. Is there a specific treatment or recipe for your yard, or recommendation for how you started your yard? What actually got you started?
Well, I've always, actually, I had a bad divorce. So I needed something to balance my mind, and also having the lifelong desire and recognizing the beauty of butterflies, that I wanted to do something in my yard. So in 1999, I purchased this yard, and I hooked up with Edith Smith from Shady Oak Butterfly Farms. She's down in Brooker, Florida, just southwest of Stark. So we became pretty good friends. And at that time, she was raising herbs in 99, 98. And then 2000, she switched over to starting to raise monarchs as a business. And I would go down there, we'd talk, we'd share some plants. So a lot of my early plants I got from her to get started from. And also Ron Davis, he had a butterfly company, and he basically gave me a couple foundation plants, some citrus plants, as well as laying some of the different tile and pathways that are in my yard. So from there, it's a matter of doing your research of what, in case of butterflies, it's important to know what particular butterflies are going to be flying in your areas, because a lot of butterflies that fly necessarily in our rural area, or our more less rural areas, which most of us live in, are going to be here, and a lot of the other butterflies that you see here are going to be out in our natural areas. So it's really good to know the differences. And I started doing a lot of research on that, and then from there you see the butterflies, then you get into the nectar plants, then from the nectar plants you get into the host plants, then from there you get into the photography of these particular things, And then you start thinking about birds, and then the shelter, and then the food, and then the water sources that you need. So you're taking all this and integrating it into your habitat, because like I said, you can have just flowers, but that's going to only going to be a certain height. Where if you have vines, flowers, shrubs, bushes, and trees, you're all different heights. So you're going from 60 or 70 feet tall all the way down to something that's only several inches tall. Also, you're looking at right plant, right place. You're experimenting. There's a lot of times no right or wrong. There's you're going to make mistakes. Don't get frustrated on it. It's important to, if you've done something and you have a result of a particular pollinator coming to it, kind of feel the joy and share the joy. For me, there's nothing more special than having my greenhouse, taking that seed, growing that seed to its adult size, and then either using it as a nectar source and watching particular pollinators come in to nectar on it, and or host plants and doing these host plants, and then watching these butterflies come in, knowing that if you hadn't have done that, they wouldn't be in your yard. And also it helps to both for numbers and diversification. So that's what you're trying to do. That's what I tried to raise butterflies in the yard, to both diversify and increase the numbers. And it just was a lot of work. And I found that if I have combination of everything, that it's actually more naturally effective.
Okay. So we're here on the screen talking about native host vines for butterflies.
Okay, we're going to go with native host vines mainly here. We'll talk about just two here. We'll talk about the pipevine swallowtail, or I'm sorry, pipevine swallowtail. That's on woolly pipevine. That's the one you see over there on the right. That's Aristolochia tomentosa. This is a very hairy, got a lot of hairs to it. It's an Aristolochia that only basically will attract this pipevine swallowtail. The other butterfly that's an Aristolochia feeder is our Palamedes Swallowtail, but that one doesn't work on this woolly pipevine very well. Our pipevine swallowtails in the field don't use this plant. They use snake root, or Aristolochia serpentaria. And this plant is very tiny. It only grows about 3 or 4 inches tall, only has tiny little leaves as its leaf mass. So it's interesting to watch the behavior of this caterpillar. This caterpillar is the most gregarious I've ever seen in caterpillars. It's always moving around. And the reason it's doing that is because out in its natural areas, there's a lot of this host plant that grows, but there's so little of it that they have to move around to each plant to get enough to go through their different instars before they finally go into chrysalis. The other plant we have here on the left is, again, our Maypop, or Passiflora incarnata. And that, again, is for our zebra longwings and our Goff fritillaries. A couple other ones we have are our corky stemmed, and also our yellow passionflower, or our lutea. I've grown these in the yard, but I'm after leaf mass. And even though they're cool looking, I want a plant that actually is aggressive, that's going to create the most leaf mass for me, because that's going to give me the most opportunity for the caterpillars to have large numbers of caterpillars in just a couple. Next slide, please. Okay, zebra longwings. The ones on the left here, I have them, they roost in my yard. So zebra longwings are a pretty special butterfly. They're ahead of many other butterflies from an evolutionary standpoint. The ones you see on the left, if you notice where their tongues or their proboscises are at, they have pollen. So they feed on both pollen as well as nectar. And the females are able to take that pollen and then they emulsify it into the necessary nutrients that they need to be able to mate with the males. It's also a butterfly that likes to trap line, which means if you have a number of different nectar sources in the yard, it'll go from one spot to the next spot, to the next spot, to the next spot. It's also our state butterfly. Lawton Childs, I believe it is 1986, created it as our native butterfly of Florida. It likes generally a more shady type of habitat, and the roosting areas can be usually on small twigs or sticks that are very sensitive to vibration. So if there's a predator such as a lizard that's a couple inches away from it, and that lizard moves, that plant is going to shake around. So it's they really choose their sites carefully, and I've had up to 18 of them in my yard, and I've seen some places where there can be actually 30 or 40. It's a butterfly that does die back in the fall, or if we have. Alexa, stop. Alexa's making noise in the background there. It's also they like to lay eggs in generally in the shade, and also when there's a female chrysalis and she's ready to come out, it's usually visited by one or two males, and they'll be standing on top of the chrysalis, either waiting for her to emerge, or knowing through the pheromones she's putting out that they'll actually stab their abdomen into the chrysalis before she comes out, and they'll actually mate at that time. The two best plants for me to have in my yard, nectar source wise, are going to be our Jatropha. This is a native plant that has red flowers to it. I keep it next to my where my computer's at there, so I watch them coming around all day. And also our Hamelia patens, our firebush. Those two are really good plants, but they come on my snow square stem and just a lot of others. I've counted in August, on a really good day, I've counted over 120 in my yard. And my yard, again, remember, is only 1/3 of an acre. But if you have enough of the right habitat, as well as enough of the host plant, you're going to have a lot of these butterflies flying around. Next one. So these are non-native trees. Sweet almond on the left. This is probably, again, the top one or two bushes you're going to have in your yard. It's Aloysia virgata here. The reason it's a non-native plant, however, it has, again, long spires on it, and it has a number of small white flowers, and which have many different florets that the pollinators love it. It's easy for them to stand on it and, again, stab their different mouth parts to get their nectar. It grows as a tree. It's fast growing. It can bloom all year long at different cycles. So I think I got 7 of these in my yard, and they're up to 15 feet tall. So when one's not in bloom, another one's in bloom. So it's extremely important. It's on my all-star list as far as non-native nectar bushes. Chase tree, that one's our Vitex Agnes castia. That one is another really great plant for our Northeast Florida pollinators. Again, it's a small bush up to a tree. Mine's probably about 12 foot tall. I've got 4 or 5 of them, but they are short in blooming. They usually bloom in June, end of May, maybe beginning of August, and they bloom for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And again, the firebush is one. That particular is the non-native, which is the Hamelia patens glabra. Another very important plant to have in your yard is the 4th one you see there. That's plumbago, or leadwort. That plant, they have a dwarf species. Don't buy it. you want to buy the big ones, and they get 4 to 5 feet tall. I would buy 10 or 12 of them and put them together in one spot, and it's a magnet for especially our swallowtails really like it. And look at the flower, you'd say, what? I don't get it, but it does it. And also it's our host plant for a Cassius blue butterfly. That's one of Florida's smallest butterflies, and I have lots of Cassius blues flying around in my yard, flittering around because of that as the host plant. Bottle brush is one I use. It's not that important to have. It's one that has some nectar source later in the fall. Azaleas, large bush type azaleas, are really good. I'm talking about the ones that get 4 to 6 to 7 feet tall, and they use. In fact, I have some in bloom right now. I'm looking at one right now, which is weird to have it in August. But they generally bloom the end of January and February and the beginning of March. Another plant that you dovetail with some of those trees I talked to you about earlier, and they like to be visited by some of our first generation swallowtails. Golden dewdrop, I have that in my yard. It's no big deal. I do have a few butterflies on it, but I planted it about 15 years ago, and my plants I got 6 of them on one side that is like a fence, so they're about 12 feet tall, and I do get some nectar value from it. I always look for this plant when I'm down in the neotropics in Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, some of these areas. It's really good for some of our skippers. The coral porterweed's another one. That plant grows, it does die back, but it's the largest of the porterweeds. It's a non-native, of course. It can be 4 or 5 feet high by 4 or 5 feet wide, and is very, very good nectar source when it's going. Tree spinach, that's choya. That's stuff that they cook. It's a plant that's from the Yucatan, and I have it because I've been down in that area photographing butterflies on it, and it has these little white flowers that are really attracted to our zebra longwings. Next slide. So we have lantana. Again, it's non-native. It is a invasive plant through the Florida Native Plant Society in both South Florida, Central Florida, and North Florida. However, here in North Florida, when we do have freezes and cold weathers, it does die back. So I've really never seen a problem of it spreading like it would possibly in our more tropical areas. But it's a very good plant for a nectar source. In fact, I had a Duke skipper on it several years ago in my front yard. That's been the only documented sighting of that butterfly in the last quarter century, was in my yard. Tropical milkweed, we have Asclepias curasavica. This is our native or our non-native milkweed that I use mostly for our monarchs, for both its nectar value as well as its host plant. It's easy to grow. It has a good leaf mass to it, and I'm there to get as many monarchs out of it as I can. And I'll talk about the OE problem a little bit later. Next is again the plumbago, how good that's a non-native, very good nectar and the host to the Cassius blue. Jatropha I mentioned, it was really good for our zebra longwing. Pentas. Pentas is another premium plant to have. I recommend just the tall red pentas, and I have groupings of 10 to 15 plants together, and when you do that, it really brings in a lot of activity. Suggestion is when you go to your nurseries, take the time to slow down, relax, and look at what all the different pollinators that are flying around, what different plants are they going to? What are their nectar sources that you see in the nursery? And then perhaps you might want to go buy that particular plant, whether it's native or non-native, because in a sense, the pollinator is making the choice for you on what they prefer. shrimp plant. I have shrimp plants that are 8 or 10 feet tall, and to look at it, you wouldn't think it's very good. Our ruby-throated hummingbirds love it, and also some of our yellow butterflies, both our Cloudless Sulphur and our orange-barred sulphur, are really attracted to it. We have Mexican giant hyssop, Agastacia X Blue Fortune. I just ordered 20 plants from my local Ace Hardware because I finally see it's finally out. It's a hard plant to find. It's usually one that you get sometimes in the summer at some of our nurseries. A bee magnet. To me, it's one of the top 2 bee plants you can have in your yard as far as attracting them. I've had that plant where I've had 15 or 20 different honeybees on it at a time. Fire spike, this I grow in my yard. It's can get 6 or 7 feet tall. I have groupings of 8 or 10 together. Great for our hummingbirds. Turk's cap, there's another one. It grows very tall. It's kind of leggy. What I do is it can grow 10 or 12 feet tall. It kind of wilts over. I just take a rope. I have 5 or 6 stalks that come up, bind it together so they don't flop over. Again, hummingbirds and our sulfur butterflies. Purple porterweed is along with the other porterweed. It's going to have in your yard. It's going to be cold sensitive, and it grows probably 4 or 5 feet. And I grow it in little groups of it at a time. False heather, there's another one that can be a ground cover, and that's good for our small little skipper butterflies, such as the Zabulon skipper you see on the left there. And also we have cassia. The winter cassia, Cassia bicapsularis, that's another foundation plant, bush tree to have in your yard. It can usually is a bush, but it can get up to 10 or so feet tall. That's our host plant for a number of our different sulfurs, particularly our orange barred and our cloudless sulphur. So I have probably 10 of those plants scattered throughout the yard. And again, it's important to take plants and to put them in different spots of your yard to reduce predation. Incense, we have passion vine, we have the Passiflora incarnata ex cincinata. This is a very aggressive passion vine. If you're worried about things taking over your yard, it might be something that you want to grow in pots. Otherwise, I let it go in my yard. It can actually cover up other plants and keep it from getting proper sunlight, kind of like Virginia creepers like that. So, but I don't mind it because, again, I'm here for the pollinators. Black-eyed Susan vine is just one that I have that's pretty colorful and doesn't do a whole lot more. The ivy leaf morning glory, again, is one that grows. It's easily grown here, and it's a good nectar source. The Mexican flame vine, again, it's a vine. It's very attractive. It's a good nectar source. It's one I grow it on trellises, and also it needs something to grab onto. It can bloom from May till June and July. Blue pea vine. This is Clitoria ternea, beautiful plant. This is our host plant for our long-tailed skipper, and I don't know if we have a picture of one later on here, but the long-tailed skipper, they lay their eggs in their egg stackers. So they'll lay eggs one on top of each other, and when they come out and they're very tiny. They'll cut a slit in the leaf and they'll fold it over like a sleeping bag. So they actually, during the daytime, they hide in that sleeping bag so that they're not eaten by the predators, so that they're able to come out at night to feed. The Lady Margaret is another passion vine. That's it has a little bit of host value to it, not nearly as well as the Passiflora incense you see on the left, all the way to the left, but I just love the flower. It's one of my favorite. And of course our Cerulean, which is another non-native plant that can be quite aggressive in the yard. The two-lobe passion flower, that's our biflora that I grow in my yard. It does get some host value to our what am I at? By 4. Yeah, for our zebra longwings and also for our golf fritillaries. What's interesting is, here's another, that plant, one year, it was in January, I don't know, a few years ago, I actually had a Julia butterfly. And again, here's another butterfly, it's a heliconian, that's from South Florida and Central Florida. And I actually had one in my yard laying eggs on that particular Aristolochia. Again, another new record for Duval County. Next slide, please. Okay. Here we have
discussed several of these. Can we kind of keep
go
going?
through them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we know we've talked about the monarch, and we'll go the next slide on that too. Then the gaseous blue with our plumbago. Okay, our monarchs. So our monarchs, I generally use the tropical milkweed. There's been a push towards using our butterfly weed, which is our Asclepias tuberosa, as versus our Asclepias curassavica. So again, I use tropical. It's one that mainly grows in northern Mexico and southern Texas, where it's being used by a lot of the overwinter monarchs that are starting to come back in March. The last adult on the that is going to be overwintering, they are interesting. Mother Nature has made their wings a little bit larger and they're more elongated. Also, they have a different flight pattern than most butterflies. Butterflies usually flap their wings real fast and are erratic and jump around and things in order to not be eaten. The monarch has adapted where it generally has more of a flap glide. So that way it can conserve its energy for its long migrations to central Mexico. So it's like flap glide. And then they'll find a wind current going from east to west, and they'll follow that wind current using that particular strategy, so it helps to conserve energy. The monarch in this particular area here in Northeast Florida has a decision to make. It can either go migrate and head west towards the Panhandle and then eventually into Mexico, or it can travel south and go into southern Florida, where it can migrate down to, and also further south into the islands. Or if there's a mild winter, it can stay right here in the Jacksonville area, and you actually can have a population that's year round. So the last 2 years, because we've had no freeze last year and a very mild one the year before, I've had monarchs year round in my yard. But again, I use tropical milkweed. I grow it in my yard, and also I when it goes out of bloom, then I'll take and I'll take cuttings of it. So I'll take every 4th node, I'll cut it just below that 4th node, then I'll put it in rooting hormone, and then stick 8 or 9 of them together in one pot, and then a month and a half later, I have a nice new bushy plant with new growth.
Expert tip there.
Next slide. Okay, so here's one of the potential problems with our Asclepias curassavica, or our tropical milkweed. Over a period of time, it can develop OE, and this is a protozoan parasite that is spread through microscopic spores coming off the wings and bodies of adult butterflies. These spores are packed in between scales on the monarch's body, and when it lays its egg, often attaches to the eggshell. It's a parasite. It relies on a living host and will generally not kill monarchs, but will lead to weakness, disfigurement, and lethargy. But also it may die from exhaustion. In the warmer regions, such as here and further south, this tropical plant grows all year. So it's recommended by the folks at the McGuire Center for Biodiversity and Lepidoptery in Gainesville to cut these particular plants back in November, so that you can have new healthy foliage that'll come out. So that'll help keep away to a minimum. Next, and you can see some of the pictures of it there.
Yeah.
Here's an example of again, we're at plumbago or leadwort. Again, another I mentioned premium plant to have. This is our Cassius blue butterfly, and it's very small. It's only about 3/4 of an inch in size, and you see one here laying eggs. And try to find the egg. they're really tiny. They're microscopic almost. Next slide. Here again, we have our Gulf fritillary or fritillary. It's going to be probably our most common butterfly in the yard, besides our sulphur or cloudless sulphur. They can be pretty common too. You notice the one on the left is going to be the male. It's going to be a darker orange color, and the one on the female on the right you see is a much lighter tone and not nearly as bright. It's more of a dull color. Next slide. This is what happens to the Gulf fritillary. It's like, what's killing caterpillars in my yard? This happens to be polyhedrosis virus. It's caterpillar can have billions of virus particles in its body. It causes caterpillars to crawl upward before they die. The caterpillar or chrysalis turns to a liquid. The virus particles drip and splash. They cover a large area as it rains in our garden, so it can spread that way. And that's what your caterpillars will look like. Another caterpillar needs to eat a leaf with the invisible virus particles on it, and will also die of that particular disease. It's particular to our Gulf fritillary. Next slide. Non-native host. Here we have Aristolochia littoralis, or calico flower, or Dutchman's pipe. There's a recent showing of that on the Native Plant Society's website about how you have to understand the plant is very aggressive, and it can actually strangle other plants because it can get so it can grow 40 or 50 feet. So just beware that it's good to have. It's our host plant for our Palamedes Swallowtail, which is our only tailless swallowtail here in Florida. So you can see there's a couple different ones there. Here's an example of this particular butterfly. The Palamedes Swallowtail is supposed to have toxins that's extracted, the caterpillars are extracted from eating this vine. And generally the predators stay away from it. But here's a case where an anole didn't listen. So it's eating it up. We also have our Eastern Black Swallowtail. So we're gonna have both our parsley as well as our sweet fennel. I like using fennel myself. In fact, I had a female black laying eggs on it the other day. And then here's the egg stacking I was talking about earlier with the long-tailed skipper. And you see its host plant here is the blue pea vine. This particular skipper, you don't see a whole lot of it in the spring and in the summertime, but towards the fall, they're starting to show up in my yard now. They literally are millions and millions of them that start migrating south into Florida. And some of my butterfly counts, I can have hundreds of those in a day. Next slide. Palamedes Swallowtail. This is the most northern range of this butterfly, and I've had it in my yard since 2003, again because of the host plant that I use. I have about 5 different kinds of pipe vines, but pipe vine, the calico flower, Dutchman's pipe, littoralis is the one that I use the most. It's a very fast flying butterfly. Generally, it's found in South and Central Florida, but because if you have the host plant, they're going to be out. Usually they take a while to get back here if we have a cold freeze. Sometimes they won't even come back 1 year if it's really cold, or if it's normally they usually come back in March or April. And they've been a little late this year, but I've got a dozen of them or so flying around today. Next. Black swallowtail. This is for both our fennel as well as our parsley and our dill We can use that for our host plants on it. In my yard, in this area, they naturally use spotted water hemlock, which is a plant that grows along river margins and creek margins, and that's our preferred plant here. Here you see it on the left. See it. This is an early one, so this was taken in February on plum blossoms, and the one on the right. Notice the difference in color. The female's on the right, a lot more blue. The one on the left has a more kind of puzzle-like checkerboard pattern. Eastern black swallowtail. These are some of our host nectar sources in my yard for ruby-throated hummingbirds. They include firebush. They have both the native and non-native, coral honeysuckle. We have red shrimp plant. We have crossvine. We have fire spike. We have trumpet vine, scarlet morning glory, cardinal flower, Turk's cap, and in this case, scarlet rose mallow. Now, I don't have any hummingbird feeders in my yard. I have all the right nectar plants for them to come in naturally. This is another important part of my guide where I have little tidbits of information of things all on one page, so you don't have to go out and do all the hard work yourself and trying to put it all together. It's all right there for you. It's just for you to get out there, get the energy to do it. Of course, it costs money to do it. And also you're gonna have to take some time sometimes to find some of these plants at some of the different plant nurseries that we have available. We have over 320 species of bees in Florida. We have European honeybee. We have our bumblebee, carpenter bees, and so on. Next slide. We have our longhorn bees. And now here's another good part for the guide. Here's bee and wasp nectar sources. For instance, I had snow square stem, sweet pepper bush, sweet almond, shrimp plant, chase tree, saw palmetto, beggar ticks, gallberries, giant hyssop, and African blue basil. So all those are really great plants to have in your yard for nectar sources. Okay, so now we're getting there. The next is what are my true colors? So here's an example of a buckeye butterfly, and butterfly colors are from ordinary, or their pigmented color comes from normal chemical pigments that absorb certain wavelengths of light and reflect others. For example, the pigment chlorophyll colors plants green. The chlorophyll soaks up the blue and red colors of the spectrum, but not the green, which you see when it bounces back to the eye. Most butterflies get their different shades of brown and yellow from melanin, the same pigment that makes you tan in summer and gives some people freckles. The hue, tone, and intensity of these colors can be affected by the temperature, strength, and angle of light, such as shown in the next picture. Next photo. So here's an example of butterfly I took in Thailand. This is the the bronze baron. So that's the same butterfly that is taken at different angles using flash. All the settings are not changed, but just because of the angle I was taking this shot or the distance to the butterfly, you can see all the different colors that come from it. So those shots were probably taken within about a 6 or 7 minute period of time from each different angles. But you can see what the results are, again, relating on the angle of the light, the type of light, and so on. Tree nectar host sources. Okay, quickly we're going to get into bloom times. So our tree nectar and host sources, we have sweet almond is going to be March to December. Eastern redbuds, February to March. Black cherry is February and March. Chase tree, May to July. Groundsel, September to November. Firebush is April to November. Plumbago is April to November. Christmas cassia is going to be April to November. And our large bush azaleas are going to be real early from December to March. Again, these are things that are going to be in my guide for you to see. That particular gator, a quick story. That gator's about 11 and a half feet tall. I was at the, or 11 and a half feet long, yeah. I was at the Orange Creek Spillway on 301. There's a cinder block area that's in a U shape. It's about 20 feet by 20 feet by 20 feet. And then you have a rock pile there. I was out on that particular area photographing a Polyphemus cocoon, a large moth. This particular gator, when I pulled up off the street, it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon where the sun was shining. It had a baby gator in its mouth. Its mouth was wide open and it was about 7 or 8 feet off the road on the. So I pulled in, she took off with the baby into the creek area. So as I'm going along this tiny little cinder block, which is only going to be about 8 or 9 inches wide by 12 inches long, and it's about 20 feet long. All of a sudden, she comes out as I'm right at the corner of this particular cinder block, and she's crawling up, and she's not more than 3 feet away from me. I'm just about 2.5 to 3 feet above the ground, and she's right next to me. I froze. I was just amazed at the size. So here I am. I don't want to move at all, but I'm trying to figure out where I can go. And generally, if I go anywhere, I'm going to go in the water because there's only this 8-inch area that I can walk on. So she slowly climbs 3 or 4 feet away. It seemed like hours, but I'm sure it was only a minute or two, where she finally got to the point where just the tip of her tail was where I was at. And that's the part I was worried about the most, is her swinging around and whipping me with her tail. But either she didn't smell me or I was no threat, and she finally walked away. But that was, I've been all over the world in a lot of different situations, dangerous situations, and that was one of the most dangerous.
Any
Next slide,
gator
please.
that you can walk away from is a good gator story. So I think this
Yeah,
is the
that's
last
true.
slide of the
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah, so these are more blooming times. These are native and non-native. These happen to be plants and vines. Their blooming time for milkweed is February to December. Pentas are going to be March to December. Again, red pentas, tall red pentas are your best. They come in different colors. Tall red's the best. Snow square stem is April to December. Spanish needles, their phytal and your Biden's elba is from April to December, and your passion vines are April to September. And then your ground cover, your Phylonata flora, that usually is going to be from April to December too. So a lot of this information and many more and much more, this is only a portion of the guide that's available to you. It's well worth the $15. And I thank you all for having me tonight.
Yeah. And you can get Bill's guide. Damien will add the link to the chat. So if you just want to be able to copy and paste his email address so that you'll have it. It is a great book and it is so helpful. And in addition to that, we have for you, our audience here, Bill has put together a special handout that Damien is also going to put the link to how to download that handout in here. And so you can just take this, one-page handy dandy cheat sheet with you to your favorite nursery and start getting the flowers and bushes and trees and vines that you need to build your garden and make it a habitat. Bill, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. Damien, do we have any final questions for Bill?
Any final questions? We just everyone saying thank you, Bill, for all the information, and a lot of people, of course, asked they've privately messaged me and asked for photos and videos of your habitat. They want to see your habitat. So we keep in mind we have a few people that are out of town. Some Seattle, Colorado was here tonight. Maybe you can share some photos with everybody. But thank you again, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. I'll set you a number of photos to you, and then you can have people retrieve them from your website.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Well,
Okay,
thank you
great.
so much, Bill. What a mountain of knowledge. And it was so exciting to hear him talk about his travels all over the world, which I think is, the next thing that we do is, a travel log by Bill. Thank you.
I need a trip to his backyard so I can get some cuttings of some of these non-native plants.
That's right.
If you want, you can get on the News of the Lepidoptery website, Lepidoptera Society, and they'll have the news, and you click on Browse, and when you click on Browse, it's going to have a series of different decades. If you click on like the 2010 to 2019, click on 2019 and 2020, and I have so far 6 different articles on 6 different publications. So I have 4 from last year, from because it's a quarterly magazine, and then also I have 2 more this year, and then the 3rd one's coming up, which will be on China. So there'll be 7 total, and it's really neat. It's really neat to read that stuff. It's pretty interesting.
I'll get that link from you, and we'll add it to the that we put on the blog post. That'd be great.
That sounds good. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for having me.
Before we,
You're welcome.
I want to give everybody a little heads up about some upcoming programs. So on August 20th, that's a week from Thursday, we have Transform Downtown's Riverfront, which is a fantastic initiative being put together, led by Scenic Jacksonville, and has gathered several organizations behind the Riverfront Parks Now project. And if you want to see all this public land that is downtown become an amazing riverfront park, and a park system that makes our city stand out on the map, this is a great program for you to attend. So that's 6:30 p.m. August 20th, and Damien will add the link for that to the chat. We also have, this is your last chance this week to enroll for the Gardening for Pollinators program done for the UF IFAS Extension Office. You can enroll through August 15th, which I believe is Friday. And it's a self-guided class, and with lots of great fun activities, and you'll learn a lot. And I think it pairs well with what Bill has told us about today. Hey, if you are not a member of the Garden Club of Jacksonville, it's a great time to become a member. We really need your support during this very difficult time, but we can't do programs like this without the support of people like you becoming members of the Garden Club. So we really appreciate anybody who would like to become a member. And Damien will add a link for how to do that. It's really quick and easy. We also have a survey. We like to do surveys for all of our programs, and Damien will add the link to that, and we'll also send that out afterward to everyone. We really need these surveys. We monitor them and use the information you give us to create our programs in the future. I want to thank Jessie Ball DuPont Fund once more for their support of virtual programs just like this. And I want to thank all of you for being here, because if you weren't here, we'd just be talking to ourselves. And we probably would, but it's not as fun as if we were talking to you. And I want to thank my partner in crime and best buddy at work, Davian Lamar Robinson.
Right-hand man. More like right-hand man.
Right and left.
And left.
And thank you, all of you, and have a great evening. And we'll see you next week for the Transform Downtown's Riverfront, August 20th. All right. Bye, everyone.